This is the Storypunks podcast, a show where we talk about all the punks. So steampunk, dieselpunk, cyberpunk, and all the other punks. I'm your host, Cindy Grigg. This is episode 26, and I'm so excited to be featuring a topic that has meant a lot to me on my author journey. So it is actually featuring yours truly today. This is one of the first episodes this is the first episode I'm doing other than, the trailer, the 2-minute trailer to introduce this podcast. It's the first one I'm doing completely on my own. And I am going to keep this as an interview-based show mostly. But once in a while, I'm going to share certain topics that have helped me and to just share on topics that people are asking me questions about. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to talk about conventions and being a panelist, being involved in different ways, especially if you are an introvert. And the reason why we're talking about this is because I'm about to go to a convention. So I've been so lucky to be involved with 2 conventions in my local area. I'm really excited to share that with you. But first, this is actually a new background. There's nothing that special about it. This is basically just my work station, my work bookshelf. And so it's where I keep books from the library. And then we've got my dictation stuff. We've got my notes, in a kind of cheesy notebook that says building my empire, even though most days it doesn't feel anything like that. And then I've got, this is important though. Got the Wonder Woman cup. And, just a reminder that we're all as lovely as Aphrodite, as wise as Athena. And then in the background, back over here, you'll see some pictures. Basically, it's because my small press is named in honor of Lewis Carroll's own self-published zine, which he called The Mishmash, and the Rectory umbrella. And I named my LLC Mishmash Publishing. You can find it at mishmashpublishing.com or mishmashbooks.com. And so that was very inspiring to me. He would draw pictures and he would, write stuff. Jabberwocky, that poem was first in that circulated zine. And so it's really fun because I am an indie author. I know many of you are, but all kinds of, listeners are involved. All kinds of guests come on the show. So it is for traditional, indie, whatever. I'm just trying to explain, the stuff on my wall here. And then I've got birds, because it just helps me feel free, I guess. I'm just on a bird kick. So I write about birds in my Peacock Levine and the Ethereal Fates of Not series. It's about the birds right now. So you'll see my background change fairly often. It's like the furniture in my house. I'm always moving it around and it just makes it feel fresh. I mean, I just love moving stuff around. And maybe you relate. But yes, I am excited to answer some questions that people have asked about conventions and stuff, because I think sometimes people see my website and they wonder, well, Cindy doesn't have very many books out yet, but she's in these conventions. She's part of, Salt Lake Comic-Con or Life, the Universe, and everything. And I know these aren't the biggest conventions in the United States, but I am lucky enough to move among these amazing author communities. And I'm so grateful that I was accepted to these shows. And so I want to share how I went about it. Everyone's journey is probably very different, but I want to answer those questions. So hopefully it'll help you. And I just want to begin by saying I am a total introvert. So if you are someone that struggles to get to events, or once you're there, the last thing you want to do is to have signed up to be speaking at the event, then hopefully you'll get something out of this, because that is totally me. I have pushed myself out of the introvert box throughout my life. So it is something that I, can look back at specific jobs or specific service opportunities that I took part in or whatever that really made me get out of my comfort zone. But at the end of the day, it is like an energy suck for me. And I really do have to be strategic about which shows I push myself to participate in and stuff like that. So I'm saying it in those terms because if you haven't heard the definition where people say, an extrovert is someone who gets energy from being around people versus an introvert gets energy from being alone and doing one's own projects. I'm definitely the latter. And so I think it's valuable, whichever camp you fall into, though, to find ways to balance out into the other side of the spectrum, or just be in the middle all the time, or whatever works for you. I tend to be kind of extreme. I'm pretty reclusive, really. And then I go to these really big shows and have these episodes of extroversion. So that works well for me, but everybody is different. And so again, this is about sharing ideas, and hopefully it helps you think about some things you might want to do either this fall or the upcoming year. And just as the quickest of updates, thedictationcoach.com is a site where you can go to find out more about dictation. Also, I've been pointing you to theproductiveauthor.com, and that also funnels into my dictation stuff. And then I have just been working on getting ready for the convention. So I haven't been doing a lot of fiction writing this week, but I am getting closer when it comes to releasing my upcoming beta version of the new version of Peacock Levine and the Ethereal Fates of Naught. And I say it that way because this is actually a book that I wrote and have been writing for many, many years. And so I am re-releasing it. I've completely restructured it. So it is a new thing. And the first time I launched it, it just didn't get very much traction. And so it's a matter of, sticking with it and persevering and hopefully hitting some better notes this time and learning from it. So I'm already getting really good feedback from the first couple readers who have looked at the new version, and it sounds like I may be more on the right track this time. So if you're interested in beta reading, you can do that. It's a way to read for free. And you can go to cindygrigg.com. So CindyGrigg.com. Without further ado, let's jump into talking about conventions. And I have a lot of things I'm going to be sharing on my screen here. So I'm going to switch to the screen mode, but you'll still hear me and I'll come back to the screen and all that. So that's for anybody that's watching the YouTube version. So just know this is an audio podcast, but you can always listen on YouTube, or watch, I should say, on YouTube. Okay, so I'm switching my screen here, and I'm going to be sharing some different things from my blog, but I'll also be sharing some websites and things from the conventions that I'm talking about. And I'm going to go really quickly because I know that a lot of you are already going to these types of shows. You're going to conventions. And so it's all about just hopefully giving you some new touch points, some new ideas, and sharing some of my tips, the things that have worked for me, because it really can be intimidating. It can be like a whole new world. And especially when you're going to them and thinking, oh, I want to actually participate. I want to be, I want to present is how I should say it, because you're participating no matter what. And on that note, that is actually how I started. So right here on the screen, we have this really pretentious title. This is actually my blog. So it starts out as a big full screen, then you scroll down. I pretentiously called this The Subconscious of Orson Scott Card. This nice picture of Orson Scott Card from Wikipedia. And so this was where I kind of gushed about the first time I went to a writing conference, which was LTUE, standing for Life, the Universe, and Everything. This is in Utah, and it is in conjunction with contests and research opportunities that people can submit to. And yet I had never heard of this. And so once I was thinking more about writing my own novels, finally, I started thinking, I better be going to some conferences. And to my delight, this conference, Life, the Universe, and Everything, it was just days and days of talking about writing. And there is probably something like this going on in your vicinity. And I'm really lucky to be in Utah because we do have this weird pocket. Like, it's kind of unexplainable why there's so many writers here, but it has worked to my benefit. If there's not this kind of thing where you live, then maybe in a nearby city. And if not, come to Salt Lake City. The tickets are usually cheap. So anyway, so I went to Life, the Universe, and Everything, and I had read stuff by Orson Scott Card obviously. I mean, of course. But he was the keynote speaker, and I really, really loved what he said in his keynote about character. So I wrote about it. And I wrote about some of the other, things that impressed me at this conference. And I just remember I was sitting by someone. I'll never know who this was. I should have, found their name or found the courage to ask their name or stay in contact with this person. But they just said, so next year, you'll be the one speaking, and just kind of joking, like we'll both be the ones speaking. And I was like, huh. I was like, I guess that's possible. I guess I could push myself to do that. And I've never seen this person again. I don't know who they were, but they just planted that seed. Like, yeah, like why not? Just you've done other hard things in your life. Just apply it. Just do the same thing here. And if you think about it, how many times have you gone and like looked for a job or really put yourself out there, and maybe not for something related to your art or your writing, but you put yourself out there. And then sometimes we shut down when we get to this thing that is so precious to us. My writing, I can't put myself out there in quite the same way for my writing. And I don't know if that's how your mind works, but yeah, I just wasn't making the link. Like, yes, I know how to send out 100 resumes because I need to work the numbers to just get one job. I know how to do that. I started doing that with conventions. And so you'll see here later that year in April, I say, oh my goodness, I can't even believe it. I am speaking at Comic-Con. And so Salt Lake Comic-Con, which they actually now call FanX. I think there was some name, disgruntlement with San Diego Comic-Con, which is totally understandable. But I've been doing this for 4 years now. And so, being involved with Salt Lake Comic-Con. And this was when I was beginning my Salt Sheen Paradox series with a book called Aviatrix. And it was before I knew how big I wanted the scope of the book to be. And you'll see that's been a pattern with me, one that I'm hopefully graduating from. But I guess it's kind of how you learn. And I know it's kind of lurpy, so I'll just address this here and now. It is kind of lurpy to put stuff out, to put yourself out there before you're ready. But I look back at this today and I'm sharing, when I'm sharing this with you, I pulled up all these tabs and I was just thinking, I'm so glad that I started, even though it was uncomfortable, even though you could argue that I wasn't ready. You could definitely argue that. But I really appreciate people giving me the chance to be able to work on my craft as a presenter and as someone talking about my work, or even being in these spaces where I am presenting my work. It forces me to be more real about what isn't working, like what am I doing wrong, and then fixing it. And so there's definitely a better clean-cut way to go about it, but I'm just sharing what I did. Okay, so yes, these are the panels that I was on that first time. They're just awesome topics. Women warriors and female shamans, how to avoid stereotypes in writing. That's awesome, right? And then the next one was the female superhero, fighting crime in pearls and heels. And then this was really cool because for these topics, I absolutely am already really passionate about women's representation in literature and movies and things. And so I had plenty to draw from, but I'm going to address one point here. Even though these were topics that I applied for because I knew that I had interest and knowledge about them, I also spent tons of time studying beforehand. I made sure I had current stuff that I could specifically point to and cite. And that really helped me feel more confident. Yes, I did go in there with like notes. Yes, I did read from them. And that's not a good setup for me. Some people can like work a note card. I'm not really one of them. But I did what I could. And so, yes, I was like looking down at my notes, but it was still an awesome way to jump in and be on my first panel. And I was nervous about that because you don't know how that's going to go. It's almost like improv, but like way toned down. You don't know what the other people are going to do. You don't know if they're going to go off on some tangent you hadn't expected and you're supposed to contribute. And I was just really worried. So it went so well though. It was just fun. Okay. And then later in the week, these were my other topics. So, writing software showdown, the best tools for writing novels, screenplays, and comics. So that was actually one that I partnered with someone else and we did a presentation. So it was awesome. We had like 6 people there. A hot topic. But you've got a picture. So I'm just realizing maybe I should explain Comic-Con in case you haven't been there. It's like this big convention floor and you go through all the booths and it's basically like a huge market and there's artists, there are performers, you can get photo ops with celebrities and all kinds of stuff. And I guess while I'm explaining that, I will show you this. So this is the Comic-Con website. This will just give you a flavor if you're watching the video. But yeah, so you walk around the convention floor and then you also, though, have this really interesting opportunity to go to the peripheral rooms. And there are just like probably 10 to 20 writing topics being explained or, a panel discussion or something. So that is what I'm talking about here is when you go out of the convention space and you are just in those conference rooms and listening to people on panels. Okay, so other than that, so that was pretty sparsely attended, this one about tools for writing novels. And it's where I learned this was really good content. Like I actually still communicate with some of the people that were in that, but it was more like a class. And if you think about the environment of Comic-Con, it's supposed to be more fun and engaging. And so you have to kind of gear your topics towards that. So if you're submitting topic ideas, that's just something to think about. Okay, the next one says, Lovecraft and Poe, what influence did they have on modern horror? So at the time I was writing something that was horror. I was putting together an anthology that was going to have some horror in it. But I had to research a little bit more in order to feel confident to step into that conversation. But I was able to talk, even though there was someone, when the person next to me sat down, I'll never forget. He was like, I am actually, I'm a PhD. I have, taught all these classes about Lovecraft and Poe. And I was just like, oh my gosh, where are my notes? You know what I mean? But he was so gracious about everything that I contributed. And I really appreciate that spirit. And so I think you will run into moments of intimidation if you put yourself into this space, but you have to just roll with it and know that even if he had been completely, a complete jerk about it, who cares? Like I don't have to contribute the same thing that these other people are. And so sometimes we think we have to be the best to show up and talk about something, but really you just have to be the most competent version that your time and experience will allow you to be and just show up. So that's my 2 cents. Okay, then I also spoke about no girls allowed, not anymore, girls who make sci-fi and fantasy chic. And then also I talked about, Hitchcock. And so basically this was crazy because I was on like 9 panels and it was just like being thrown into the fire. Later that week, we talked about Downton Abbey. I was on that panel. And then I was on a self-publishing, indie publishing, and traditional publishing kind of showdown panel. And that was super, super interesting. So yes, a flash in the pan type thing. This one called FantasyCon. But this was a really cool convention, FantasyCon, but it just didn't last. Like I said, at the time, this was the book that I had out, and it was called Hulda Snoops. It was basically about the Hulda folk, who are the hidden people in Iceland that do interesting things like steal people's stuff. So if your stuff's ever missing, you don't have to be mad at your neighbors. The Hulda folk took it. And when I visited Iceland, I was just fascinated by them. So I was going to create this detective series for kids. And I was so proud of this title, and now I hate it. The Case of the Smellular Phone. And it could emit smells. So anyway, but it was cool because I actually was able to submit a panel topic. And so I thought, well, I've traveled to Iceland and I'm going to go ahead and make this presentation about it. And it was just a PowerPoint, but I worked really hard on it. And so I called it Iceland's Influence on Fantasy. And just in my travels and talking to other people, I came across a lot of interesting stuff about how different fantasy writers that we all know and love had been inspired or at least commented on Iceland's landscape or Norse mythology. And this was really the trip that made me really interested in Norse mythology. So I went and, I talked about Jules Verne and even Tolkien and some different things. So that was really fun. So I actually started out by doing a solo presentation. And in a way that was freaky, but in a way it was something I'd done because I've been an instructor. So actually it was less scary for me. And I had this prop, and it was something I was passionate about. Of course, I went on this amazing trip to Iceland. And if you're watching the YouTube version, here I am hiking a glacier. And yeah, it was so fun to share that. So people were so cool. Like the room was not packed, but the people that were there were so engaged and just asking questions. It was so fun. And so that really was a good experience for me to jump in with. Again, if you're watching the YouTube video, I'm showing these huge blocks of ice at the Glacier Lagoon, and it's lava beaches. So it's like black beach and huge blocks of ice bigger than people. And they're see-through. It's just gorgeous. Then here we have, one of the many waterfalls in Iceland. And then right here is there's this beautiful church with a clock tower, and you can look out through the clock and see out over Reykjavik. And so that's what this picture is with the brightly colored roofs. And there was so much that I could share with my audience that was visual, and it was awesome. Okay, so you get the idea there. And then that conference never existed again. By the way, I did pull Hold a Snoops, the case of the cellular phone, off of Amazon because I realized I don't want to write middle grade yet. And if I do, I'll probably use a different name or something. So that was just a choice to pull that back. And then the next year, I talked about writing and health, and I talked about dictation. That was really well attended. And then later in that session, I talked about equality and speculative fiction. So you'll see it's just more of the same. And then in 2015, I also talked about Jane Austen. And this was just so interesting to talk about Jane Austen in the context of speculative fiction and at a Comic-Con. And I met so many cool people that taught me about podcasting and some of the things that I've stepped into. And a lot of these were just like conversations outside the bathroom, for heaven's sake. Like there's just so many ways to get new ideas and to start thinking about things that you wouldn't otherwise. And then this was a really cool one, 150 years down the rabbit hole, the impact on popular culture of Alice in Wonderland. And since I've been such a nerd about Lewis Carroll, and I have my small press that definitely hits on that, I was able to speak about that. And there are so many cool things that I learned. I mean, picture being on a panel on these topics with these other 5 people that have really awesome things to contribute and say. But I will say that was the conference. I remember it was this scenario. Yeah, where I showed up and they were just like, who's the moderator? So one person's in charge and they prepare the questions and they call on everyone and they kind of keep order. And then they, direct the audience with questions, and nobody stepped up. And so throughout this conference, I just realized if you show up and you just have some basic questions, then you can step into that role. And that's what I did. And I learned so much by being prepared to just do that because other people just weren't. And I wasn't before. So it's not like you have to be prepared to be the moderator, but nobody was there to be the moderator. And so it was a way for me to realize that I really enjoy moderating it because then I don't feel so freaked out. Like I know where it's going to go. But I mean, how can I look at that and not think that it's helped me be a better interviewer, like for this show and some different things? So hopefully that helps you see some of the advantages and the situations that you might be thrown into if you go about it the way I did. So then I also went to this other conference, and I want to mention this because this was a completely different setup. So Life, the Universe, and Everything, I had attended it, but I had never spoken at it. And when I was accepted to be a panelist, I was a little bit freaked out because this one was a little more academic. I mean, it's not really, but it has ties to like people publishing papers and academia and stuff. So, and it's a symposium, and it is, I mean, it's not like come take pictures with comic superheroes. It's all about writing. And so it was a little more intimidating to me, even though it was smaller. And so I just wanted to share what happened with me on this particular journey. So yes, I announced that I was going to go, and then there was actually this opportunity at this one. Before I talk about the things I presented, there was an opportunity to sign up for these pitch sessions, and you could pitch someone, and you could say, "Hey, here it is. Here's $20. You pay extra. Here's $20. Look at my, query letter if you're going for like a traditionally published submission, and tell me what's wrong." And it was awesome. So I spoke with Toni Weibskoff, and I hope I'm saying that right, of Baen Books. And she was absolutely wonderful. She was fierce with her criticism, and I needed it, and I loved it. She was great. And so that is a really cool thing that can happen at conferences. And it really helped me for like years to come, because everything builds, right? So that's really cool. Also, look at this guy. This was so cool. I joined my first writing group at a writing conference, and this guy has the right idea. He has this sign on his shirt that just says writing groups. Looking for /starting, talk to me. So I took a picture of him. But yeah, this is a great place to meet up with people. So I absolutely love these benefits. Now, as far as my panels, there was a time travel one, and all kinds of different things there. Keep it short and sweet because you kind of get the idea at this point, right? But 2016, I was actually delighted to be on my first steampunk panel. So that was really cool. And so it just is that common thread of pushing you to meet more people and to express yourself differently and to see things a different way, and to just make yourself do something hard, but it's immediately a payoff because everybody's so cool. So yeah, so that's Comic-Con, and it is a boost to your vision of what you could be as a writer. Here is the author page for Comic-Con in Salt Lake City, and you'll see there's all these really cool bios where they just have the author's head, and then the books, some of the books that they've written. And look right here. Did you know Evangeline Lilly wrote a book or a series? I mean, that's cool, right? Author of The Squicker Wonkers. I've never even heard of that, but that sounds awesome. Here's this man's, the bomb, the awesomeness, Brandon Sanderson. And, just so many, I could just go through this whole list. And it's just cool to scroll through here, and you're a newer author, putting yourself in my shoes. And then here you are, and it gives you that vision point. It gives you that insight that you can make this happen. You're making this happen slowly but surely, but you are making this happen. And so it's really cool to think about, okay, you donate all this time, because it is a lot of time. It's like a 3-day convention, but you donate your time, and then when you're not on a panel or stressing out because you're about to be on a panel, or in the fetal position because you just were on a panel, and you are in the green room, and you'll chat with some of these people, and you'll grab some snacks. And so, yeah, I really think it's worth your time, and it's worth your time to keep trying to get in. I feel like I got in really quickly, and I feel like it was just timing. I'll be super honest and real about it. I think, yes, I put myself out there. I didn't know anybody at this convention. I don't know any of the organizers. I do now, but I didn't know them then. I just reached out through their submission form, and I think I was just lucky. Also, I did have stuff out there. Yes, it was Hulda Snoops. Yes, it was, the case of the Smellular phone. But I had a cover. I had a book on Amazon. I had an author site where I was blogging every week. And so I had the stuff. I had a bio on my author site. And yeah, it just said, I've written Hulda Snoops. But I think when you put all those pieces together, then you submit and you give it your best shot. And again, there were plenty of shows that said no. So by being trying your hardest and trying to deal with the pressure and hanging in there, then hopefully they'll ask you back. I'm glad. Okay, so just really fast and furious here at the end. I have some notes. You'll see me looking up into the upper left or right, depending on how this turns out. Okay, so yeah, basically, when you are a panelist or a moderator or a single speaker, just know that you are going to reap so many benefits: better interviewing skills, better people skills, the ability to put yourself out there when you do not feel like it, knowledge of the industry and the people in it. I have so much more knowledge of even things that aren't particularly on my path, but are just adjacent to the writing path that I'm going down. And that's helped me so much. There's also networking skills, and experience talking about your book. So at the beginning of every panel, they're going to go down the line and ask you to introduce yourself and talk about your work. And it has to be short and sweet, and you have to, make it seem punchy and interesting. And that's all you've really got. And then at the end, sometimes they also say, where would you like people to go to find out more? And you say your website or where you'll be. And I wasn't super into like having a booth, but I may do it in the future. But that's another way you can participate is you rent booth space, and then you're at the panels and you say, come to booth, 641 or whatever it is, and I'll give you a free this or that. And there you go. So yes, you're going to have experience talking about your work. There are a few other tips I will share, and that is to remove physical barriers. So I'm standing at a desk here. You can't see it, but when you're a panelist, I don't know why they do this, but they put this big table in front of everyone. And it's like separating yourself from the audience. And I know from all my years of teaching and presenting professionally that you don't put barriers between yourself and the people. So the way I circumvented that is just before it starts, I don't like sit up there. I try to not sit up there and just talk to the other authors as much, because it's not really our elite club up there. I really don't like that vibe. And so I usually try to talk to people in the audience, get up and go talk to people and find out what they want to hear, especially if I'm a moderator. Sometimes I'm talking to my co-authors too, but just something to keep in mind. The other thing is always prepare your mind to moderate. And I already talked about that because you might be moderating. You may not realize it. And then always bring a physical representation of your books. You want to be able to show it while you're talking to people, and then people kind of set it in front of them near their name tag. And so just know that could be a thing. And then always bring physical takeaway cards with you. I have these really, really thin cards, and they just stand out a little bit because they're smaller. They're not the usual size. So that's worked well for me. And you always want that, because even though you're saying your website and people are perfectly capable of writing that down or taking a note, it's actually cool to do that, because then they feel like they have a reason to come up and talk to you, and it helps them feel more comfortable to come up and talk to you. All these people that you see in this picture, they probably would have jotted down my website, but it was cooler that they came up and talked to me. We had really cool conversations. So that's another thing. And then also, you should always come to the panel with questions of your own, like, what do you want to know about the topic? Because it really is something that changes the energy, makes it more about like, man, this is what I'm wondering about. Like, I'm here to learn too. And it can be a cooler vibe, I think. And then also just don't forget to smile. A lot of my panel pictures, like where I've asked someone to take a picture of us in the audience, it's funny because nobody is smiling. Like, and you can't be smiling like the whole panel, but often these panelists know someone's taking a picture. You'll say, is it okay if I take a picture? And nobody smiles. They're just like sitting there. And it's just a small thing, but I think that can help a lot. And then I guess that's pretty much it. One last thing though is try to see it as a celebration. So it can be really easy to be like, I need to do this for marketing. This is a task, or this is a chore, or this is torture, or whatever. But try to see it as, a celebration. And, I spend so much time writing throughout the year. It is a celebration. And yes, when it is the week of Comic-Con, I will be honest, I get a little bit freaked out, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still doing everything else I'm doing, like working and stuff. But now I have to also fit in Comic-Con, and I have to not think of it that way at all. It's such a gift and an opportunity. So just something to think about there. I hope this has given you some things to think about. I am excited to jump in with Comic-Con, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit about it next time. I'll just do a quick recap. And then I will also be sharing a wonderful solar punk and eco-punk interview with you. With Mary Woodbury. You are absolutely going to love it. If you are interested in the dictation courses that I mentioned last video, and I said they're coming in September, those will be released by the next time I release an episode. So be looking for those, and you can still go and pre-order, which basically you're just emailing me and through my email form at theproductiveauthor.com, and that way you are locked in so you can get the discount for pre-ordering. And then my book, Hives of the Halcyon, so the Salt Sheen Paradox Deco-Punk Time Travel Thriller, is also up for pre-order, which means it's cheaper as well. So that catches you up with all the things, and I'm going to get back to trying to get everything done. And as I said, celebrating that this week is Comic-Con. I am really excited, and I look forward to meeting anyone that may be there. So be sure to come say hi, or maybe in a future show here or there, or maybe I'll be at a different show. It's wonderful to have you in this community, and good luck pushing yourself to reach out for more when it comes to your art, your writing, or whatever. I look forward to talking with you in 2 weeks.